On behalf of the Honorable Vice Chancellor and the Center for Internal Quality Assurance of Krishnakanta Hendik State Open University, I extend a warm welcome and greetings to all of you. Today we all have assembled here to listen to an academic talk on the topic Quality of Institutions and Sustainability, Insights from Economic Studies. This talk is being delivered by Professor Joydeep Baruah. Can recollect that a few days back we were discussing about revival of the academic talks in KKHSOU State Open University. We used to have regular academic talks. Because of some reasons, there have been some kind of small disruption that needs to be revived. And then we thought that why not we discuss something about quality of institutions, not from the micro perspective as such, because all of you are aware of the recent declaration of the Nobel Prize and the citation mostly referred to the work done in this area, quality of institutions. But that has got some larger implications. However, Professor Joydeep Baruah, who is a very widely known researcher, he has areas of interest, he has interest in different areas of knowledge. So he thought that why not, along with this, maybe we can refer to some other economic studies also, and we can throw light on the topic. So to that extent, he has prepared and he obliged to our request to deliver this talk. The agenda for this talk would be about 45 minutes. He would deliver the talk, and then we will have about 15 minutes or so for an interaction. Within 1 hour, we intend to close this program. And I hope that this program will be highly beneficial to all of us. Without prolonging the introduction, straightway I would like to request Professor Joydeep Baruah, who needs no introduction among ourselves. So I request Professor Joydeep Baruah to kindly come and deliver the talk.
Very respected Professor N. Sharma sir, my colleagues in the university, and also the research scholar friends and our officers, staff, whoever is present here. I am deeply honored and privileged to be asked to deliver this talk today by SICA, and for that I must thank Sharma sir for his initiative and also making it happen today. And it is a very pleasant moment for all of us, because today also we are having the induction program for newly recruited PhD scholars who are also present here. Before I go into the topic, I just want to take a couple of seconds perhaps to specify that this idea of this talk came into existence when I was discussing with Sharma sir about the recent Nobel Prize in Economics, which was announced on October 14 last. And this is basically recognizing the studies on economic institutions and political institutions. And then I was actually giving an interview to a local web channel, Northeast Now, and I shared this link to sir and we were discussing those things, and then he suggested that probably we can have an academic talk on this theme, and then you can probably share these ideas and also things with a larger audience, which can help reviving the academic talk tradition in our university, as well as it will also be beneficial to our people also. So that's the idea. I do not know whether it will be beneficial or not, but I still try to do justice to the topic. And he also suggested that probably if you can take some points for say university, because the Nobel Prize is given for the macro studies, the countries, different countries having different institutions, can we also take some learning which we can use to understand the functionings within the university? And that is the last thing that I will try to do, and that I have put in my presentation. So basically, what I have today before me, three things in a sense. The first thing that I will be talking about this year's Nobel Prize in Economics, their main ideas and contributions, that what are the things they have suggested, what are the things for which they have been recognized by Nobel committee as a very path-breaking kind of analysis. I will talk about that. Secondly, I will try to also provide us not really a critique, but I will also try to flag some ideas which are coming forth, questioning the findings and contribution of those authors. That there are certain points which we can actually try to highlight, flag, in order to understand their contributions. So that's the second point I will try to do. And then I will come to the third point, which sir was suggesting, that can we have some takeaway points for our university relating to different sorts of institutions which can be useful to improve our performance maybe, or which can be very useful to understand our the different functioning within the university. So these are the three things that I will try to do, and most of the part will be concentrated on agenda number 1, then agenda number 2, and then agenda number 3. Now you know that this year's Nobel Prize is given to 3 economists, and as usual these are all US based economists again. The first one is the it's called Darren Asumulu, not Muglu. Z is silent. He is a Turkish economist based in USA. He teaches in MIT for quite long time, early 90s. The second one, Simon Johnson, is his colleague in the MIT. And third one, James Robinson, teaches political science and economics in University of Chicago, Illinois. And they have been writing about these things for quite some time now. And I am particularly interested to deliver this talk and excited a little bit because of 2-3 things. One is that inequality is my own area of interest. In that context, I am little familiar with their work for quite some time. Secondly, I had occasions of meeting one of these laureates, Darren, in Greece in 2014 in HDCA conference, just after publishing his most celebrated book in 2012, that is the Why Nations Fail. And therefore I know that what are his main arguments, because we had occasions to talk over lunch. And they have been given this prize, and the citation, Nobel citation, is specifically mentioning these 2 things. They have been awarded Nobel for studies of how institutions are formed and affect prosperity. Now, prosperity among the nations, the countries. And they have helped us to understand differences in prosperity between the nations. That means you have got different nations at different levels of prosperity, and they are trying to understand why there are differences across nations in terms of poverty and prosperity. And then finally, their conclusion is that the basic reason for the differences in the prosperity across nations or across countries is actually the kind of institution those countries have. And this is where they are trying to argue, and this is what they want to suggest for us. As I have said, they have been writing on this topic for quite some time, about 25 years, but a series of articles, series of books, I will mention 5 main, the articles and books based on which I will try to deliver this talk today. The first article was published in 2001, that is the colonial origin of comparative development. It was published in American Economic Review in December. And you will be surprised to know that this article is 333 pages long. In this article, the basic argument which was placed before us is that they are trying to establish an empirical relationship between the European mortality rates that they had during the period of colonization with the kind of institutions and prosperity. They are suggesting, because it is 333 page long article, I am just summarizing the main argument. They are saying that during the period of early colonial phase, the Europeans have moved to different countries, and in those settlements they have faced certain resistance. They also face certain natural hazards, and because of which the mortality was very high in those countries. Many people have died because of two things: one, because of disease and other natural things, and because of different violent resistance, due to which many Europeans colonizers died. And they suggest that when the mortality is very high, it was very difficult for them to settle in those colonies. So they were not interested in putting up institutions which are robust, good, strong. So they ended up putting institutions which are basically very weak and which are not very properly developed, just to extract certain things to the benefits of the colonizers rather than the people there, and they then moved on. So they tried to empirically establish this relationship, the rate of mortality during that period, and the kind of institutions and the prosperity that we have today. And they argue that due to the colonial legacy, those institutions still survive in those countries, affecting the today's prosperity also. So that's the article, which is highly influential article. It immediately invoked a kind of discussion among the academicians during that period, because that was the period, if you recall, there was the discussion on inclusive growth also. This is 2000-2003, and then this article came, so it immediately caught attention of the academicians, popular imaginations of people, and they tried to discuss, and it was highly cited article. That is in 2001 in December. The second piece was a part of a book, Handbook of Economic Growth. This is also a pretty long piece, 111 page long paper. Here the main argument is this, that this title is "The Institution as Fundamental Cause of Long-Term Economic Growth." They are saying that institutions are very important. Institutions, not a physical organization. These are the rules, norms, how to conduct an economy, how to craft a state. So those institutions are basically of two types. One is the political institution. The second one is the economic institution. These institutions provide incentive to perform. If institutions are good, there is an incentive on the part of the individuals to act more, perform better, and that ends up bringing prosperity. But if the institutions are not providing enough incentive, curtailing the individual freedom, not allowing people to do what they like, then they cannot participate in free life politically, economically, and therefore that will result in a kind of a stunted kind of performances and then growth as well. This is the first argument. Second argument, which is most important, they argue that it is actually the primacy of political institution. that decides the economic institutions. Because it is the regime, the rule, government that will put up those institutions, economic institutions. If the regime is not good, if it is authoritarian, then you will not get institutions in economic sphere which will allow participation of people. But if the rule is democratic, then you can expect greater participation. It is therefore the second argument, which is very important argument, that political institutions, quality of rule of governance is primary deciding the economic institutions, the quality and nature of economic institutions. So that's the second argument. And these two arguments are put forth with data analysis highly forcefully in this second paper. And then third paper, title is called same year 2005, published in Journal of Political Economy. Again a very long article, 50-page article, the 333, then 101, 11, then 50, where they are trying to unbundle institution. Title is this one. That when they say institution, what they exactly mean? They are saying that two institutions are extremely important, and these are fundamental. You can have large number of institutions, as I have said, that institutions can be in the form of norms, social norms, customs, law, or say the rule, constitution, all those things. But they are saying that in the political sphere, the institution of private liberty, individual freedom, and in the economic sphere, the right to property, private property, are at the core of understanding all other institutions. I will try to make this connection very clear in a subsequent thing. That they are saying that the main thing when we see all the institutions, one institution politically, that how much personal liberty you have. If you do not have personal liberty, then you have an authoritarian state. If you have a good personal liberty, you have a democratic state. So that's the political sphere. In economic sphere, you must have the right to property, private property. If there is no property right, then you do not have the equal amount of freedom to participate in economic sphere. And that is one argument we still carry when we examine women's empowerment. That is why we say that the women must be given the property rights if you want to liberate or allow them to take part in the productive sphere, coming out from the reproductive sphere. So that argument is quite for a long time it is there, but they are also sort of reiterating that. So this is there. Now then, after a few years, they have published their classic book, because of which they have got this Nobel. The first one published in 2012, the Why Nations Fail. And they use this framework, institutional framework, to understand the different nations' prosperity and poverty across the globe. And the last one, very recent book, that is the Power and Progress, they are trying to see the role of technology in this whole framework. So I'm not going to discuss that part. That can be another kind of discussion. I'm not going to discuss that part. I will limit myself to the book published in 2012. And this is the basic text based on which you can understand the contributions of Asemulu and his colleagues, for which this year's Nobel Prize has been given. By the way, the institutions, role of institutions in analyzing the economic performances are not very new. Nothing new in this. It is already there. They have been given the recognition for different kind of thing. It's not the institution as per se, but the way they have articulated and way they have placed their argument, for which I will come to that, they have been awarded. You can go back to the 16th, 17th century, where you have people like Thorstein Veblen, who have written about institutions very long back. And in modern times, in 20th century, 21st century, you get people like Ronald Coase, Douglas North, both got Nobel Prize. They have also studied the institutions, and they have influenced a lot of decisions regarding economic sphere. Now, the Douglas North they have acknowledged, these authors have acknowledged that they have huge influence from the Douglas North. So Douglas North they have acknowledged. So it is not the first time that they have been saying all these things, but they are saying in a very different context and with a very different kind of articulation. Now, this is a very interesting map. I am using this map. A slightly different version of the map is there in his book, but that is black and white, so you cannot see the kind of things. So I have taken a colored one, which is giving you the sense what they are trying to argue. What they are trying to argue, that if you look at this map, this is the GDP per capita map. The green ones are very high, alright? It is above $50,000 per year, and the more red, these are very less, 1,000, less than 1,500 kind of thing. And if you see this map, then you can see that not many countries are having very high per capita. There's, for instance, suppose this is the America, and Canada and Greenland. These are having above 50,000, 60,000, 80,000 per capita. Then you have got Europe, where you get the former colonizers, the Britain, the Dutch, Spain, Portugal, all this section is there. And then you have got very interesting Australia and New Zealand, which were the colonies, alright, which were the colonies having very high kind of per capita today. And then if you look at this map, then you will see that the other countries, for instance about Russia, is slightly greener, which was authoritarian by nature till 90s. China is also becoming green, which is also communist. Then if you look at the just bordering USA, the Mexico, it is yellow, that means there is a huge gap. Then coming down from Mexico, you get the Peru, Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, this Latin America part. And then within Asia, you get the Middle East, the Iran, Iraq, slightly greener because of oil. And then you have sub-Saharan countries which are all red. And they are trying to understand that why there is a difference between these countries, and if there is a difference, can we find some patterns in it? What are the patterns? One very clear pattern is that there is a distinct divide between north and south. This line, if you look at the line, this line, all greens are toward the north, and all the less green or reds are toward the south. Alright, so there is a clear north-south divide. This is called global north, developed countries, and global south, developed countries. This is the first thing they have argued, clear north-south divide. Now the second point, which he calls the lay of the land. The chapter is titled as the lay of the land, how countries are placed across different things. They are saying that if you go back to the history, now this is where they are slightly different in terms of their analysis, because those people who normally write economics do not refer to history. We do not hardly go back to our history. And this is a study which is using ample historical data and analysis. And they are saying that if you go back, say, little ahead, say 1,000 years, you will not get the divide. This north-south divide will be eliminated. It will be reversed. That in those periods, the Chinese civilization, Egyptian civilization, Indian civilizations was very high compared to this green today. There was nothing in USA. There was nothing in Greenland. There was nothing in Canada. So therefore, just in the history, it was not there. This divide was not there. So the question is that what happened during that period which had brought about this divide? And they are saying that colonialism is one answer which resulted in this great reversal of fortune. This is his term, their term, the reversal of fortune. The rich countries become poor and poor countries become rich. So why is that? That's the first question. Now, they are saying that colonialism is one epoch or event resulting in this great reversal, and then persisted this inequality. After colonialism ended in that form, around 50s, all the colonies got almost freedom, former colonialism, but that divide continued. Only with the exception of countries like Australia and New Zealand. Australia was also a colony, New Zealand was also a colony, but they are not having this divide, they are now green. So they try to answer that puzzle, that if we say that colonialism is the event bringing reversal of fortune, then why is that there are countries like Australia and New Zealand which are now developed? The answer they are providing is something very interesting. They are talking about that. Before that, let me also quickly go through three hypotheses which sort of try to answer this question, that why there is a divide, and then each of these arguments have been countered by these three authors. The one very common argument is the geography argument, that geography is different, resources are not available. We know about this thing, that not all resources are available everywhere. Climatic conditions differ, so production of crops cannot be everywhere. The other characteristics which greatly affect the production and productivity. And also they have looked mortality data, so they are familiar with the diseases. They have seen the distribution of diseases in different climatic conditions, and they are saying that geography is a factor, but not definitely is a fundamental factor. Alright, it cannot answer all the differences. It can answer some of the differences, but it cannot answer, for instance, difference between America and Mexico. This is just bordering to the countries. That there more or less geography is same, climate is same, but huge difference. The one, Mexico is having the per capita around 8,000, 9,000, and then just bordering the America, you are having 56,000, 60,000 kind of. That gap you cannot explain by geography hypothesis. So it can explain certain things, but it cannot explain everything. And also historical evidences suggest otherwise, that if geography is the cause, then in the history how that was happening, that it was reversed. The geography remains the same. It has not changed. So if 500 years back it was just opposite, geography being constant, what has happened which has reversed the fortune of these countries? So therefore they eliminate this geography hypothesis altogether, even though people have been writing about geography as one of the idea. One of the most celebrated author is actually Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs is providing this idea that geography makes us a very huge difference. Second is the culture hypothesis. We all know, sociologists will know, the Weber and all. The process they are discussing about the role of religion, cultural norms in explaining why people work more, why people who do not work more. It makes sense. For Indian, suppose if we look at Indian society, the Indian society for a large part we were concerned about the world after our death rather than world that we live in. Alright? So we were concerned, religion for instance, we want to think more about what will happen after my death. Alright? We are more concerned about that. So we are not concerned about this present kind of world or present kind of life. So in that context you cannot expect any incentive to work from the more prosperity kind of thing, and it will not be seen as a very virtuous kind of thing also. It will be considered as a vice, amassing property, getting benefit day after day. So that's not seen as a kind. So culture and all these things are there, and it is already there. But they are also saying that it cannot be considered. They are not undermining this role of culture, but they are not saying that this cannot be fundamental cause. It cannot be root cause, because there are differences which cannot be explained by the culture either. The last is the policy argument, ignorance argument, that people do not know what is right for them, and that is why government fails to take appropriate policies and reform, and they continue to linger on the poverty and so on and so forth. So they are saying that this is very difficult to understand today, at least, the argument of ignorance, when everything is open, everything is known to people, and they are seeing the evidences. Why people will remain ignorant? Alright, so they are also rejecting that. So three arguments which are already there in the field, they have countered each one of them. Extensively they have written. I am just summarizing because of time. And then finally they are saying that institutions are at the core. Alright, so this is their argument, that geography cannot explain, culture cannot explain, ignorance cannot explain. That is explained by the kind of institution that you have. Now, this is if you want to understand what the institutions are, then these are the rules. These are the rules influencing how economy is organized and works, and incentives provided to people to work. So basically two questions: that how you decide that where to work, what to produce, and once you produce, how you will decide that who is going to get what. So it is a production decision and distribution decision, how these decisions are taken, how economy is organized, and these are the institutions which will decide that who decides that you will go and cultivate in the field. If it is a culture, alright, or if somebody is telling you, then this is not the kind of institution that you want to have, because culture will perpetuate your poverty if you are in poverty. It will perpetuate your prosperity if you are in prosperity. There cannot be any breakaway point. If somebody is there telling you what to do, then also you continue to be in the same state of affairs. There is no chance that you can change or alter that. So therefore you have to be having some institution which will allow you to work where you want to work, according to your kind of resources. Alright? So that institution is important to have. Alright? So two decisions. One, what to produce, where to work, and once you produce, that how do you decide that who is going to get what percentage of that product. So essentially this is a decision regarding production, and essentially it is a decision regarding distribution. So what are the institutions which are affecting or influencing these two decisions, are the main decision which will result in the poverty or prosperity of the nation. That is their argument. I'm reducing like anything. There are many things, because they have gone for global study. Every country, every data have been analyzed. So I'm just reducing just to come to the main point of the argument. Now, they are if unbundling the institution paper, they are trying to explain what they mean by institution. They are saying that it can refer to the norms, rules, principles facilitating or influencing those decisions, and that can be in the form of an abstract or concrete form. Concrete form means you can have a constitution, written rule, or you can have some idea, notional, passed down from generation to generation. That's the abstract. You cannot see it, you cannot get it physically, but it is there. So both way it is possible. For instance, suppose our tribal institutions, customary law, these are passed down from generation to generation by the tribal people. You cannot have a written code for those customary law. You do not have a law kind of codified kind of thing. But for us, if you have a law passed in the parliament, you have a hard copy of it. You can see those things written, codified. So you can have in both forms. You either orally or generation to generation, or but as a written form. And then they are saying that these institutions, when we club it in two spheres, the political and economic, then we have finally two great institutions which subsumes all these institutions, and these are called state and market. The state will decide the political sphere and the market will decide the economic sphere. So state and market, these are the umbrella institution, and within that umbrella institution everything gets encapsulated. And the most important, this is most important finding of them, they have characterized, that is why I titled this talk as a quality. It's not about saying that you have institutions. It is about understanding the nature and quality of those institutions. That is important. That is the distinction between earlier institutional economists and these authors. Earlier said that institutions are there, they did not try to qualify those institutions, characterize and typify those institutions. These authors have tried to classify those institutions by types, that what are the different kinds of institutions that you can have. Basically what they are suggesting, you can have two sets of institutions. One, institutions can be extractive. Extractive means you get most out of it without giving any share. Or you can have inclusive institutions where everybody gets equal opportunity and equal share. So those institutions, if they are extractive, authoritarian state, then it will only end up benefiting only few. But if you have an inclusive set of institutions, then you will have a prosperity at the mass level. And that explains the high per capita in Australia and New Zealand. Why? When the colonizers went to Australia and New Zealand, they did not face the kind of mortality that they had in other subtropical countries. Number one, the indigenous people population was very less, so they could not resist, and disease was not there, so they can easily settle. And when they settled, today also these are white settlements, when they settled, they accommodated the indigenous people and tried to put up institutions which can benefit them as well as the local people. But if they were facing high mortality either due to disease or due to resistance, they were not interested in setting up institutions which are inclusive to benefit them because they are the enemies. They tried to put up all kinds of institutions which are extractive. They will benefit only the colonizers, not the indigenous. And that legacy still persists, and that explains the kind of institution we have in other colonies rather than Australia and New Zealand. And that is why the New Zealand and Australia is having high per capita according to them, rather than the other colonies like West Indies, India and subcontinent, sub-Saharan, tropical countries. So that's the idea. So when the institutions are extractive, when they are extractive, when the colonizers faced the kind of resistance and the natural deserts, mortality was very high. The first paper, they were not interested in putting up the institutions which are inclusive to benefit the others. They were trying to put up institutions which are extractive only to benefit them. And where they have the settlements, they did not face any kind of disease or resistance. They put up the institutions which are inclusive that could benefit them as well as the others. So this is how they have different kinds of institutions across the countries, and the brilliant part of their analysis is that they have studied each and every country history with all empirical data, trying to find relationship between these three things: the kind of resistance and deaths, the kind of institutions and level of development. So that is why their work has been recognized by Nobel Prize. Now, this is a picture given by the Nobel Committee. I just want to give that there was this tower is a colonizers, and everybody went through that process, and you have two routes. Either you give an institution which can only benefit the colonizers, or you can have the institution where everybody can benefit. And then accordingly you get this north-south divide. Now, I'll just give you a framework of this, and this is very important, and then I'll come to my last part of it, very quickly. This political economy framework, what do I mean by, or what do we mean by political economy framework? Now you have two spheres. One sphere is the political Then the second sphere is economic, and then you have different concerns. What are the concerns? In the political sphere, you are concerned with the control and power. If you can control, then you have the power to control, then you are the ruler. But if you do not have that power, you become ruled. So when we talk about politics or political sphere, we want to see how these powers are accumulated and distributed. In the economic part, we want to see the wealth, how wealth are generated, production, and how wealth are apportioned, appropriated by different agents. These are distributions. So this is there. Both these processes are having the underlying process of accumulation. Some processes are there by which power gets accumulated in few hands and wealth gets accumulated in few hands. So there is an underlying process of accumulation. So political economy will try to understand the linkage between these two processes of accumulation. How powers get accumulated and how wealth gets accumulated, whether there is any nexus between these two processes, whether more wealthier becoming more powerful, which is actually happening. Alright? When you have this power, then you try to control the political sphere also. And if you are ready to share that authority, political regime, then you can share the wealth also. So that's the kind of linkage political economy will try to explore. And this is the framework within which their analysis can be situated. And the first sphere, the subsuming institution is state, nature of the state. The other sphere is actually the market. Alright? Now, second point, I do not want to digress, but just to mention this, that normally we do not understand the connection between liberty and property. That why the Asamolu and others are trying to suggest that if you want to have the personal liberty, freedom, then you must have the institution of private property. How these are connected? If you look at the history, not far, then you will get a sense that this is a book by Thomas Hobbes. This is called the Leviathan. And in the Leviathan, the original book, you have the cover, this big, picture of a king subsuming and controlling everything. So, this authority of the king was always questioned. One answer was that they have the divinity, divine power and all these things. And another practical power was that everything he owns it. He was the owner. And therefore he has the control and he can control everyone. Nobody has anything. So when the people started during the period of Renaissance, people were talking about the political liberty, freedom. The question is that, okay, at the ideology level, philosophy level, that is perfectly fine. But how do you institute this freedom? So one idea was that big king's ownership has to be distributed. His authority has to be distributed across the people. And that is the logic of having this connection between that private property is essential for achieving the personal liberty. If you miss that point, you will not be able to locate this whole debate and you will not understand what is actually being talked about. So that's very essential, that unless and until you question the authority of the big king and distribute his ownership among the people, you cannot actually control the authority of the king. And that is where liberty and the property rights are linked, and that is where it is to be seen. Now, I'll just come to the very distinctive features of this analysis, and because of which Nobel Committee felt that these authors should be recognized, they should be awarded. First point, the scale and scope of the study, enormous. You see the size of their papers, 330 page paper, 111 page paper, not a single small country have been escaped, all data, all history, they analyzed it, so it is a very extensive study. Second, historical approach. Normally people do not write economics with reference to history, so this is one. Colonialism, they are making sense of the colonialism normally in economics, we hardly refer to colonialism. When we study Indian economy, we do not start with colonialism. But without referring to colonialism, we cannot study Indian economy. That's the reality. But we tend to forget that nothing was there, and then we try to study and make sense of the economics. So they have not done it. So they are referring explicitly to colonialism. But they are trying to, their treatment of colonialism is something problematic. I'll come to that critique, but here it is important to understand. They are saying that acceptance and rejection of colonialism, and they are in favor of accepting colonialism, that if you do not resist, then you have a set of good institutions. But if you resist, then you will not going to get good institutions. So sort of legitimizing colonialism is already there, and that is very typical of US based scholarship, where you try to legitimize the past colonizers and also the present imperialism. So that is where the problem lies. And the last part, which is very contrary to the Marx said that economy is main, and based on the economy other institutions will fall. But here they are saying that politics is main. The political institution will decide the economics. So this reversal is something very important, and that is very distinctive about the analysis. Now in summary, if we try to conclude, then we have these two things. One, that nature of the political institution is vital for equality of the economic institutions. That if the political institution is good, then you can have set of institutions in the economy which are good. And we can accordingly have 4 sets of institution types. Political institution is extractive, economic institution is extractive. And you can see the countries where this is happening, then you will see that these countries are basically the persistent poverty you will see. Then nothing is inclusive. Politically they are authoritative, ruled by some self-interested kings or monarchs, and nothing is shared, everything is accumulated and consumed. So they are getting a very rich king with a large scale poverty. Second set, the inclusive political institution and inclusive economic institutions. There they are saying that they are putting countries in that basket, and these baskets are giving all the sustained prosperity countries. That if you want to have a sustained prosperity, the quality of institutions should be inclusive, both politically and economically. And the last 2 variants are important, that one set extractive, second set inclusive. You can have extractive political institution, authoritarian political institution, trying to make inclusive economic institutions. One example is Russia. During that phase that you have an authoritarian state, but you plan and everything, that is there. China at present is having that kind of a government, but they are saying that this can have a narrow prosperity. You can have a short-term kind of prosperity, but doubtful. How long people will accept that kind of a command is very doubtful. So whether sustained prosperity will be there or not, it is questionable. So therefore they are acknowledging the tremendous growth happening in China, but they are very skeptical about the future of China. And the last part, you can have a inclusive political institution and extractive economic institution. They are saying that it can also lead to a very limiting kind of prosperity. One example normally we can give is India's experiment with the planning. Normally planning is not associated with democracy. You can have examples of planning in command economy, where you have an authority and then you can have a planning. The India is the country, and that is why ideologically mixed country, where we experimented planning with democracy. So democracy is an inclusive institution, but planning is a kind of an extractive economic organization, and it came with some success, limited success, then it stagnated, and then you have to do away with planning and all. This is not my argument in any case. This is the argument the authors are putting. So this is what we have learned from their analysis, that institutions are important, political rule is important, nature of the political and quality institutions are very important, that will decide the economic prosperity and all. Major criticisms. I have 2 slides, I will finish. I think almost 40 minutes are passed. Let me finish it in 5 minutes. Now, major criticisms. First criticism they are coming up with, that their idea of colonialism is extremely problematic. By essence of colonialism is exploitation. You cannot have a good colonialism. And why would not anyone resist if somebody comes and dominates him? So there is a big problem of having a good colonialism and bad colonialism. So that's the first kind of idea. Second, it does not explain within country inequality. For instance, suppose America is not all good. Within America inequality is extreme. So it does not explain that either, right? Third point is that whether these institutions located within country are independent or not autonomous. Can they act autonomously? There are supranational, say, institutions like World Bank, IMF. They will try to influence those institutions. So can they remain independent? Can their actions be autonomous? That part is missed in this analysis. Alright? Now, they have celebrated the idea of private property without bringing in question the division within the society that can institute. For instance, suppose moment you have private property, there will be two classes having private property without having private property. This division, the role of this division and their impact is not discussed. So they are celebrating private property without referring to the kind of class division that can create at the end. Next but last is the reductionism. So they are everything they have reduced to institution, forgetting about all other kind of factors. So people believe that development, prosperity, these are multidimensional, cannot be reduced to single dimension of institution. And lastly, they have missed out this political economy framework, even though they are suggesting political economy. The dialectical relationship between the poverty and prosperity. What is this dialectical relationship? The poverty is not absence of prosperity. Poverty is there because of prosperity. You are gaining at the cost of others. So therefore, this dialectical relation, the development, underdevelopment. The underdevelopment will be there so long somebody is developed at the cost of those underdeveloped. So it is not merely an absence of development or absence of prosperity, but because of the dialectical relationship which probably is missed in this whole analysis. Now, I have, with the mandate of SAR, tried to sort of take 6 points which can be learned for our university. Now, our university institutions, what are the institutions that we have? The authority that we have. And authority by mean that as defined in the acts, statutes, rules, ordinance, etc. These are already defined, that they rule the university. They are in command of the university. So you have institutions in place. Accordingly, you need to have those institutions inclusive in substantive sense, not in the procedural sense. Procedurally you can be inclusive, that you take somebody in committee form, all these things. But in substantive sense, that has to be inclusive. So that is the first point. If you have inclusive institutions which can rule the university, then only you can have a set of other institutions which will allow people to participate and incentivize this participation. So that can happen only when provided you have this inclusive set of institutions. And this has to be autonomous and independent. How much we are independent of, say, UGC? How much we are independent of, say, suppose Director of Higher Education's notices and directives and guidelines? That's very important. So how do you make this institution not necessarily cut off from that, but how do you accommodate those, bringing flexibility so that you can exercise a set of autonomous or independent decisions is extremely critical. We need to have devising incentive for all categories of other stakeholders. That can happen only when you have an inclusive set of institutions at the authority level. That the fourth and most important, that as this study shows, what is extractive
that when the benefits is taken by few, only at the power. When it is shared, then it is inclusive. So therefore, the authority must not be guided by self-interest, rather than needs to be motivated by the collective interest. So that's very essential if you want to have a sustained growth and prosperity within the university, taking that insight from the studies. And then lastly, the meaningful results, meaningful reforms can actually alter the state of affairs. Just as in the history, they have shown us that great reversal of fortune, it can also happen within university, that if you find that certain problems are there, you can easily reform, change those statute, ordinances and all these things, make them more inclusive, make them more flexible, accommodative, guided by collective interest and all, and then probably you can have a sustained prosperity at the level of university as well. So with this I end, and thank you everyone. Thank you.